know I don't mind using this. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Finance Committee meeting for today, August the 12th. As you know, we were on vacation or sabbatical or whatever you want to call it for the month of July. Our agendas normally now, since we have been doing this policy of taking July off, our agendas coming back in August are sometimes a little bit long. But we're going to get through this, and we're going to be family and friends after it's over, okay? The first thing I want to tell you is we have on the agenda 29 consent items, and we have 4 general agenda items. We've changed the layout of our meeting, but we've always done the consent items first. But now when the council sees them on our agenda, they are listed first versus the general listed first, then the consent. At this time right now, I will ask the committee and the council if are there any consent items that they would like to be pulled for further discussion.
I've given you mine now.
Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Burke has given me C12 and C16. Councilmember McIntosh has given me C2 and C5. And I have given C13. Any others? May I have a motion, please, for the balance of the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the balance.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded that the balance of the consent agenda be accepted. Are we doing? I don't have. Okay. None of us do.
And I'm going to do a voice vote.
All right, let's do it. Okay, that'll work too. We have all yeses and no, not any no's, so it's moved and passed. We will now move on to, will the secretary please read the first consent item, which is C2.
Item C2, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2018-2019 affordable housing. This item was referred back to the Community Development Housing General Government Committee at the June 17, 2019 City Council meeting.
Ms. Councilmember McIntosh and Ms. Newman, would you come forward, please?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. First of all, is this time sensitive, particularly the allocation? Okay, let me just get to it. It has come to my attention through a couple panels that I serve on that the implementation of the new TAP fee increase is really hitting the affordable housing producers, Habitat for Humanity, and some other private folks. I'd like to see if there could be some money from this body, from the bond funds, to help alleviate some of that impact, because we're going from $700 in fees to $3,000 in fees, and I didn't. It may be room for that in there, but I couldn't find a spot where I thought it fit.
Yeah, good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee, members of the City Council. Councilmember McIntosh.
Identify yourself, please.
Yes, ma'am, my apologies. That break, I must have.
I know, we got to catch back up.
My name is Damon Duquesne, Assistant City Manager. Councilmember McIntosh, as recently as today, the chairman of the Utility Commission directed staff to develop guidelines or a checklist of sorts for projects that would qualify as affordable housing, and the Utility Commission is willing to subsidize the system development fees on affordable housing projects. Essentially, they'll use cash reserves to pay those development fees on behalf of a developer building affordable housing that meets that criteria. The challenge at hand for staff and for the bodies that are assisting in the affordable housing effort is to define what that affordable housing means, and to what level do you take it to workforce housing? Do you do those sorts of things? So as recently as 2 o'clock this afternoon, that directive was given to staff by the Utility Commission.
Great, I'm very happy to hear that, because the last meeting that I attended, the Utility Commission had not offered that up as an option, so that they would help subsidize that. So I'm happy to hear that, although it sounds like there's a lot of details to be worked out. So you're saying, in fact, we do not need to allocate any of our housing money from the bonds to that effort?
Right now, that, in my opinion, no, sir.
Okay, if that changes, we have flexibility in moving some of this around. Okay.
Ms. Newman, would you give the 2-minute elevator report about what this is about and why it came back again, and the meeting with the coalition and others?
Good afternoon, Marla Newman, Community Development Director.
Good afternoon.
So the bonds came back, or the proposed budget came back, so that the Affordable Housing Coalition would have an opportunity to weigh in on any potential questions or concerns. We've done a preliminary review with the coalition in May, and subsequent to that, a couple of the members had some additional questions. And so we tabled this particular proposed budget, giving them an opportunity to go into more detail at their meeting, which was about a week and a half or so after the last council meeting. So that meeting took place June 28th, and we had the majority of the coalition members present, and at that time there were no recommendations or suggestions of any changes to the proposed budget.
Thank
May I ask a question?
you. Yes, Mayor. please.
When the coalition meets, do you have a list of the dates that the coalition meets? How-
Yes, ma'am, we do now. The next coalition meeting will be August 24th. I'm sorry, no, 23rd, August 23rd. So the coalition meets every other month, and then in the alternating months, their working groups meet, and we have dates through October, because the next meeting after the October date would be December, and so they've not set a December date, but we do have the next two meeting dates available to share with the public.
So it's listed somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any more comments? Councilmember Lawson.
Have we finalized our target development zone maps yet?
I'm sorry, say again?
Our TDZs, are they the maps, mapping of those zones, have they been finalized yet?
No, sir, they have not. Actually, we had a meeting on that just 3 o'clock this afternoon, community development staff and staff from the planning department, so that we can start to look at what criteria should come into play in selecting what those targeted development areas might be.
So we'll see that again. We'll see that mapping
Yes, sir.
question
Oh, yes, sir.
as to what area is actually eligible for the funds that are listed here.
That is correct. And probably what we will do is create a collection of areas that might meet the criteria that we're looking at, from transportation to community assets, things of that nature, and then bring a package to the council, and then kind of let council decide how many of those particular areas based on the available funds that we have.
That answers my question.
We move for approval of C2.
Motion to approve?
Second, madam.
It has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying, voting. I do it all. By voting aye. All those opposed,
Madam.
Thank you.
no. You have 3 ayes and no noes, and it passes. Next item, please.
Item C5, resolution authorizing the acceptance of a gift deed from Carol Myers Louis and G. Mildred Myers, located in the South Ward.
This is Mr. Councilmember McIntyre.
Hey, can we just get a quick briefing on this?
We're on C5.
C5.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Adams, members of the committee. My name is Tasha Logan Ford, Assistant City Manager for the City of Winston-Salem, and I also have our Real Estate Director with us as well.
Good afternoon. Good
Item
afternoon.
C5 is the consideration of a resolution for the acceptance of a gift deed from Carol Myers, Louis and Jean Mildred Myers. This is property in the South Ward. This represents approximately 7 acres that could be used by the city to advance our parks and open space that we have available. This item will be presented to the Parks Commission at their August 13th meeting. Currently, this area is a wooded lot. There are no immediate development plans that we have for the area. And looking at parks and open space in the area, we realize that Hobby Park is the closest park that we have in proximity. There's access to the property from Swing Court, and it's nestled within an existing neighborhood. At this time, as I said, we would have to figure out how the property would be developed, and that would be done in conjunction with the neighborhood.
spoke with the council member of the ward today, and we talked about process and kind of why this is coming to finance before it came to recreation and parks. I guess my concern is, do we have a plan for this? Do we just accept things as they come? And with that, are there obligations down the road that are going to cost burden us, not just on this property, but as we, it's not looking a gift horse in the mouth, and if somebody wants to give us 7 acres, I think that's good, but it's not good if we don't have a plan for it, and if it ends up being a cost burden on us.
I can address both of those. The first one, in terms of the timing and the sequencing, typically the Recreation Commission would meet prior to the committee meetings, but with the way the weeks happen this month, we're just off of the schedule. So it will be presented to the commission on the 13th. At that time, if there were any questions or concerns that were raised by the commission, then staff would ask for that item to be pulled from the agenda on Monday. So typically the sequencing would be, it would go before the commission first, and then it would come before this committee for consideration. In terms of not having any specific development plans for the area, we don't. So our future obligation would be for us to go through some type of master planning process with the community to determine how we want to redevelop this area. For us, there is a master plan process in place. The planning department is working on the Parks and Recreation open space plan right now. It does identify neighborhood parks as being an area of interest for residents, not necessarily the larger regional parks, but think about how we service smaller recreational activities within neighborhoods. In terms of thinking about our ongoing commitment, that is something that we have to think about, because we do get offers for people wanting to donate property to the city, and if we don't have a viable use for those, then in some cases we do not always accept them. For this, from a staff perspective, thinking about the location, thinking about other parks that are in close proximity, we felt it would be beneficial for us to have this property for future park amenities.
Is there any reason to accept it not as a park in case isn't it more difficult for us to sell or swap or whatever, get rid of parkland than it is, and that's not designated as a park?
It could be, and we've had the conversations whether or not there would be specific deed restrictions on this property, saying it had to be used for a park. At this time, the owner has not requested that it would be specifically for recreation uses, but from the staff perspective, I'm not exactly sure what other use we would have for it if it wasn't for a park at this time.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense that if the owner was giving it under those certain conditions, you would do it that way. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
It's always good when somebody's going to donate something to us and it's usable. Back there, and I think that's the kind gesture we've had people to donate. But a few years ago, it was stated, I believe, by the city manager or someone, we would not be accepting property. Do you remember that, Mr. McGarrett? We would not, somebody said that. I don't know where you had to evaluate the use of something. We were going to put a hold on it?
I know we put a hold on selling property in case it was except for affordable housing. I'm not sure that. I'm not sure to take a look.
Okay. You can take a look because there's some other folks that like to donate a piece. I've got something to donate to you too. Get it off
We can round up a whole lot of
off of mine. Paying taxes on something. Okay.
Right.
But I think it's a good parkland we need. And if someone wants to donate 7 acres, whether we change not to be parkland, that's some good land to have. Mm-hmm.
Make a motion to. Oh, I'm sorry.
May I have yes, Councilmember Lawson.
This is in the South Ward. I've observed that southern part of the ward for a long time and have been a bit advocate for getting Hobby Park brought back up to its proper standards. But this is even further away. And in that particular area, a green space, this is heavily wooded, it's got a little stream running through it, is a perfect natural environment for bird watching, walking, and a variety of very passive, low impact activity that will stabilize that neighborhood. It's very accessible to the houses that surround it, and I'm glad that somebody's willing to donate that amount of land to us. So I appreciate the council looking closely at this.
Motion approved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye or voting yes. All those opposed. And the motion passes Next item on the agenda, please.
Item C12, resolution authorizing the sale of fee simple right-of-way, permanent drainage easement, permanent utility easement, and improvements to the North Carolina Department of Transportation, an agency of the state of North Carolina, relating to the U.S. Highway 52B future I-74 interchange with the Winston-Salem Northern Beltway, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160A-274, located in the northeast corner.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I just want a little brief information about it, please. Just give us a little.
Okay.
Be short one.
Kurt Bjorling, Real Estate Administrator. The landfill owns a number of properties up in the area of Haynes Mill Road. And as you all know, NCDOT is building a new major interchange where I-74-52 will interchange the Northern Beltway. And there are several landfill properties that are being affected by this. These are three that NCOD has identified. They've had appraisals made. Staff with utilities and myself have reviewed the appraisals, and based on the per acre value of what the property purchased for, we're getting a very fair offer for what's being taken. There's some of it is fee simple, some of it permanent drainage easements and so forth. So this has also been approved by earlier today by the Utility Commission, and now it's coming to you to approve the sale, and these funds would be coming from NCDOT, and they would be going to the landfill since that's where the property is being taken from.
Madam, the reason I wanted this to be brought up is because a long time ago when we started with I-74, most of the folks have forgotten that we even was going to do I-74, and finally we got enough money through the state that we're not doing it. In fact, they had a church had over 4 acres, and they took that and they bought 4 into the northeast ward. We had a retreat with another church. They took his, and he's trying to buy some property over into the northeast ward. But for public awareness, this started. Do you know when it started, Mr. Duquesne?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Somebody else didn't know it either, city manager. And I told him, y'all better get with it now.
It's been 20 years, I believe.
Yeah. I have a picture down in my office with Robert Northington, Larry Wumble, and myself when we pulled that flag, that little sheet of cloth over the state. And it's been a long time coming, and we're glad. So, Madam, I just want public awareness, and I'll move for approval if I'm in order.
Second, please.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please vote by saying yes.
Yes.
Those voting no. It's been approved. The motion's been approved. Next item, please.
Item C13, consideration of items relating to the extension of Akron Drive.
I had this one pulled. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Duquesne, you're
Madam
up.
Chair?
You're up.
Yes, ma'am. I won't read the item to you, and I may ask Assistant City Manager Evan Raleigh to give me a hand here in a moment. However, this is the agreement with NCDOT and Winston-Salem, or the Whitaker Park Development Partnership to extend Akron Drive through Whitaker Park, allowing access. There is one piece of this that has yet to be resolved, and that is if that at-grade crossing is going to be put in place, then the at-grade crossing at Reynolds in Indiana was being considered for elimination. That, however, would cause an impact to the citizenry that currently uses that access. So to date, I have not received word on whether that crossing, the railroad crossing eliminated at Reynolds in Indiana, counts as 2 crossings, or what other improvements need to be made in the area to accommodate the traffic that used to use that. Staff did bring this agreement before you today because we're not willing to move forward with the construction. However, this agreement would secure the funding for Akron Drive, and I just wanted to make sure that Madam Chair, you and the committee and the members of the council knew that staff is very aware and still working on resolution to the Indiana crossing.
Mr. Garrity, as I've spoken with Mr. DeCane, again, I've asked for the map. I've asked for where is this going? And this money has already been approved through the bonds, community development, economic development. But as I was talking with him and other staff, and Mr. Raleigh, you can chime in anytime you want. If there's anybody here from, Whitaker Park, I'm glad to listen. But this motion of this the passing of this resolution only approves the bond money to the organization. It does not mean that the project is going to happen until the citizens of the North Ward and coming from the Northeast Ward are satisfied on how the logistics will be.
That's correct. I don't believe the traffic study is complete yet either, Mr. Duquesne, is it, to look at the impact of that closing if that other crossing is removed, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So we need that traffic study done. We need input from the neighbors who will be impacted by that. No decision has been made to actually build this road and close that other intersection, and this does not make that decision. This is just the funding that will come back before council.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Madam, when you talked about it earlier concerning the needs of the residents to make sure they would have access. Also, when we met up at the airport and the man from the state transportation man, what did he say about that Akron as far as reaching toward that airport area?
I believe what he said, the Secretary of Transportation said that would be very helpful to tie Whitaker Park directly into the airport, and which we all agree with. It's just it's part of that, making the airport more of an economic development engine, tying that to Whitaker Park. I think the question still, though, is the impact of potential closing of Indiana on the other side of Reynolds Boulevard, and that has not been resolved yet.
Madam, the reason I brought that up so it'd be for the record how much we are in agreement to see progress in that area.
Thank you. Mayor, Councilman Scipio? Yeah, I said mayor. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have just a simple question. What's the urgency in the need to approve this money at this time until we have an idea of what is going to be used for and how it's going to be used?
Mr. Raleigh.
Good afternoon, Chairman Adams, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the committee. Evan Raleigh, Assistant City Manager. Councilmember Scipio, to your question, this is pass-through money from the state. So the state has actually awarded these funds, and we're trying to get those funds encumbered, which is the urgency. So these are all monies that will be coming back to us.
Councilmember Larson.
So the state has offered us up $1.3 million. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Larson, that's correct.
And we've committed $1.2 million so far?
That is correct. 1.25, yes.
Right. So we're at $2.5 million for the project. It's estimated a $4 million project.
That is correct. And we also have some money set aside from the original allocation of $4 million that we put into the partnership, the public-private partnership back in 2016. $4 million. There's $2 million that is remaining of that original $4 million. It was for public infrastructure. And so $1 million of the $2 million remaining is also going to support the road project as well.
So we're close if we hold the $4 million.
Correct.
But we don't have drawings, or we don't have engineering yet to really know what we're dealing with. I would reiterate, I think, Councilmember Burke, or Mayor Pro Tem Burke, that this is a very important project, I think, to our community, and that development of the Whitaker Park area is the hot subject right now for our future development of recruitment. And I hope we can resolve the transportation issues and get that road straightened out. I know it's difficult, sorry for you, but it is important we keep moving on it. We need to move on it. Thank you.
Mayor, along with what Mr. Larson said and continue with what the city manager said, that airport is an economic engine. We've got to change the whole look of how that airport, how it served before. There's another way it can serve that will boost the economy of this city. But you've got to get things where people can come and go and make it attractive as they leave the Whitaker Park. They'll be flying in. not real big flying like commercial flying, but to be coming and going. So we need that, and I thank you for your comments, and I know
Councilmember Scipio.
And I know we do these traffic studies, but I like to make sure that everybody's aware it's not just the residents that in the surrounding area. That Indiana corridor is a great pass-through from everybody, particularly the east side. That's how we go to the west side, and down Reynolds Boulevard, again, is a very important intersection. So I think this is a very complicated issue that we've got a lot of pieces to put together and listen to before it's resolved.
Being that I've lived in that area not too far from there most of all of my life, to Mayor Pro Tem's point and the other points well taken, there is another piece, as we've said before, downtown is downtown. But until we start to grow other pieces in our places in our community, whether it's the southeast side, the south side, the southwest side, the northeast side, the east side, the north side, downtown is just what it is. It can't grow out. The city can't annex. So they've got to now, we have to move to other places in the city. And we all know, the ones of us that's been here for a very long time, know the economic impact that Whitaker Park had on this whole county, if not this part of the state. So the fact that Cook Medical is coming to move in, they're already doing a lot up there, getting their campus ready. They're at 600-700 employees. Hopefully they're going to move up to over the 1,000 mark. And we have other businesses there that are also coming as we move forward with this. I just want everybody to understand, again, I'm all for my Whitaker Park. I worked there as a college student, my dad, my brother, everybody. But the logistics piece of changing a major road that connects the east side of the city to the west side of the city through the North Ward is so important that we'll take the money from the feds and the state, and we're going to do our part. The city, the citizens, and everybody voted on that. But we've got to consider the citizens that live in that community, the ones of us that go down Indiana all day, every day, and come up Reynolds Road to Akron Drive down. It's like 5 streets that have an impact on that one big major intersection. That intersection is like the Stratford Road, 5 Points. Everywhere in the community, you got Carver, you got something like, well, that's ours. And I just want to make sure that I have enough community meeting and engagement and input that they are aware and they understand, and I got to hear them. That's just the way it goes. Again, no plans have been made, yet the plans have, but they haven't been finalized. And you guys, you all will see that. But this is a very important piece. As the Mayor Pro Tem said, the airport is getting a lot of resources. We've got the school, the STEM and everything going up there to teach for those aeronautical jobs that are available at Honda Jet, which is ramped up and expanded 3-4-fold. That we now in Winston got to get our people ready, our young people and others ready to be able to get trained and work at that airport, and some of that business comes over here because they can only do the airport so much now. They're about out of space in Greensboro. Their next move is to move some of that to the Smith Reynolds Airport. So, again, this resolution is a motion to accept the pass-through funding from the state of North Carolina Department of Transportation.
I move for approval, madam.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please identify by voting yes. Thank you. The motion has been passed. I think that is all of the consent items. We got 16. All right.
Item C16, resolution authorizing the sale of 2 city-owned vacant lots on the East 15th Street under the upset bid procedure, North Carolina General Statute 160A-269, located in the Northeast Ward.
Yes, Madam Master.
Yes, ma'am.
The reason I wanted you to be aware of this, these 2 lots are close to the church, and that's why we are selling But right now, we're going to be on a hold. I want the public to know any property located near Liberty and Cleveland, going down into 17th and 15th, headed toward the area of Bethlehem Baptist Church, Christ Missionary. We're going to be putting a hold on that until we come up with a more of a organized plan for that property over there. So the reason I asked Mr. just, that's simple, what they're asking for. So, Madam, that I wanted it for the records, and I will be ready to make a motion.
So is that basically what the resolution says? That Kurt, that we are for? Who's over there?
When you say the resolution said,
The resolution authorizing the sale, you're asking us to not approve it?
no, to approve that,
To approve this one?
because
Okay.
it's just two pieces of property right close to that church,
Okay.
small church. That's fine. But I'm saying when other things are coming up, we're evaluating it because we have a hold on trying to get that area a little more organized than what it is with what's coming up.
Okay. A motion?
I move for approval of that one.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please do so by voting yes, and those opposed, no.
Mine
Bill is passed with 3 yeses.
I tried to
and 0
vote,
no.
but I'm too late.
Now we'll move on to the general agenda, of which we have 4 items. Councilmember and Chair Clark, do you want to go ahead and
I'll
present?
take those. How did consent go?
Here's your,
Get everything done?
yeah, we got it.
All right.
We pulled all 29 items
Yeah,
and discussed them
and went
thoroughly.
through every one of them.
All right.
Hang on a minute. We got to. There we go. I apologize for being late. I did notify, and Ms. Adams, I knew would do a very good job for me. We will now go to, by the way, if you noticed, you didn't point out that the consent items are listed first now in the order that we do them. So the general agenda is listed at the end now. And we will now go to G1. If the secretary please read that.
Item G1, consideration of items relating to the Choice Neighborhoods Planning Grant, East and Northeast Wards.
Okay. Ms. Ford, would you like to give us, or,
Yes, yes.
excuse me, Ms. Newman, I didn't see you snuck up there. Will you please give us an introduction to this? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Marla Newman, Community Development Director.
Good afternoon.
I'm coming to you again on behalf of an application in partnership with Hawes to submit. Okay, we're going to get this to work here again. Let's see how we're going to advance this. Alrighty. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. All right, so this is an application for a Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant. As you'll see that previously, Hawes, in partnership with the city, submitted applications in 2016, 2017, and 2018 for an implementation grant, which can have a maximum award of $30 million. This past year, 2018, the application was submitted in partnership with McCormick Barron Salazar and Urban Strategies. And so this year, we are back again. We were not successful in 2018. One of the things that came to us as part of the debriefing from our 2018 application dealt with the size of the targeted area. So you see on the slide that we have adjusted the boundaries for the target area to be more in line with the size geography that HUD had recommended. And essentially, we shrunk the footprint to more closely align to the planning area that was a part of the initial planning grant that Hawes submitted in 2013. So with that, I provided a little information about McCormick Barron Salazar. Again, they were before us last year, before the full council, to approve us moving forward with the application. One of the things I'll highlight about McCormick Barron is that of the organizations that have submitted choice applications since the inception of the program, McCormick Barron has probably been the one that has received the most awards on behalf of their partnership. at 12. So they've successfully been awarded 12 applications. And McCormick-Barron is basically the development arm or the development partner in these choice neighborhood applications. Urban Strategies is a nonprofit affiliate of McCormick-Barron, and Urban Strategies' focus is on community engagement, the people services, and how we best serve individuals who live in the neighborhoods that are being redeveloped. And so part of why we are here with you today is to get your approval for the city investing as the co-applicant and partner in this application, some of the funding that's necessary to start the engagement with Urban Strategies on community engagement. One of the challenges, if you'll recall, we had last year is when we started on the application, that was approximately 10 days before the application was due. We had no opportunity to do the required community engagement that the request for funding availability requires that we do. The NOFA was just released last week, and so the timing is ideal because it now gives us a couple of months to actually engage the residents in Cleveland Avenue Homes. There is a survey that has to be done with each individual resident family in that neighborhood, and then there's a larger survey and engagement process that needs to happen with folks in the targeted area for the grant. So this gives us an opportunity to get on the work of doing our community engagement in a timely fashion and a very in-depth fashion so that we can actually score the necessary points that attach to this particular area. And so the total budget for the community engagement and pre-development work is $215,000. $50,000 of that has been committed by Hawes and by their board just last week. And so we are coming to you asking that the city provide the remaining $165,000 of that $215,000 budget. And I can also switch over and show you what some of the deliverables will be with that particular investment. So I just kind of give an overview again. The notice of funding availability was released a week ago today, and it requires that the community is driving the project, planning and implementation, that the plan is based on needs of the residents of the target housing sites and the results of a needs assessment, and those are things that will be coming through Urban Strategies, and that the plan is well-defined, sound, and is results-oriented. So again, as I stated, Hawes and the city are partnering with the principals, McCormick-Barron and Urban Strategies. Urban Strategies is the lead partner for development of that neighborhood housing and people plan. So the engagement that we are looking to undertake will result in an actual plan that becomes part of the implementation application. So activities that Urban Strategies will undertake will be an updated comprehensive survey, as I alluded to a moment ago, the neighborhood surveys, and at least 5 resident or community meetings will take place throughout the Cleveland Avenue Homes target redevelopment area. They will also hold a charrette. They will also partner with us to work with the State Housing Finance Agency to see if we can somehow receive a preference for tax credits, and then also work to make sure that all of our strategies are in alignment from the federal, state, and local level. Ultimately, at the end of the process, any work product that's produced will belong to the city and Hawes. So in the event we are not successful, we can still take that information that we are asking you to invest in, and we can use that for future development opportunities should this application not be successful. Presentation.
Questions, comments?
You were ready, though. You were ready, though.
You're fine. Okay, any questions or comments? Ms. Adams.
Yes. Again, we all know the pain we went through last year with this application and the council as well. I am glad that we're moving forward. Again, it's about partnerships. I'm glad that we have that partnership with the Housing Authority, that we've been meeting with these organizations for over a year or so now. in the future, some of us will be visiting some of the sites that the organizations have done in Baltimore and others. The thing that I really like about this one is we've got more time.
Yes.
And the piece that kind of stopped the train was the fact that we didn't do a very good job of community engagement. Federal government dollars and other nonprofit agencies that deliver funding to affordable housing and neighborhood community development, they have to see the data and the documentation that you did due diligence to the people that live in the community and that they have some ownership. So I am looking forward to this, and I am very glad, just like you said, that we get to keep the information. And for those that don't know, this information is very valuable when you're now out shopping around for other grants and opportunities. Councilman Taylor, whether that's youth bill or anything else, reentry programs, this information is very important. Thank you, all of you.
Okay. I got a few council members. Ms. Burke?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm pleased that this is before us. I've already met with Ms. Logan Ford and her staff concerning this. When this project came to us earlier, I said to the mayor, I've been around the block quite a few times, and I don't think this is going to pass because you have not done some things that need to be done that Hood requires. And one of the things was engaging the neighbors and also listening to and seeing what's in the area. I'm hoping that this will pass. But what I did say in meeting with Ms. Logan Ford and her staff, we want to have an understanding. If this does not pass, Mr. City Manager, that's a broken area there. It is a very broken, and by the way, Councilwoman, I asked them, even though a little bit is in your area, out of respect, make sure the Councilwoman from the East Ward is well aware of everything we're talking about. And so they assured me they're going to make sure that that happens. But when you look at that area, our police spend up there so many hours. They can be up there from sun up to sundown, and the same thing's happening. And you see little lost children, and you see strange people back and forth selling those drugs. And you see people as if though this is where I stay, but can I really feel like this is my home? They're frightened about the condition up there. We have spent, I don't know how many dollars for the park. It's a beautiful park up there. It's a historical park where the black baseball players played their baseball, and it's so attractive, but nobody's using it. We have spent a lot of the tax dollars on the marketplace. Nobody's using it. So in order for people to use the area, it must be attractive. And when I look at some of the things that we could put there, and you know how we've been talking about a grocery store, they will have enough property in the area that we can put a grocery store, and it's going to be up to the mayor as he goes out, talk to other businesses, to work hard with these developers to see if we can get a grocery store once we get a good plan. So I'm praying and hoping that it will pass. I appreciate Ms. Logan Ford and her staff, Newman, for all you all have been doing, and Mr. Raleigh to make this a reality. Thank you.
All right, Ms. McIntyre.
Refresh my memory. Last year's effort was kind of a Hail Mary.
Yes.
And what was the reason why we did it? Because we knew that we were going to be turning in, a less than a effort. But there was a reason that we took a shot at, and I'm trying to remember what that was.
Yes, there was a belief that there were not going to be very many applications last year, and that we had a good shot of being one to actually get over the finish line, because it believed that there would not be many applications.
What did we spend on that last year?
I'm sorry, say again?
How much did we spend on that last year?
We did. They did it pro bono.
Okay.
Okay, Ms.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I'll get around to everybody. Ms. Scipio, you may.
I know we now know the timetable. When is the deadline for the applications?
I believe it's November 4th.
So it's not a real long lead time, but it's more than we had.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And so our $165,000, what is the source of that funding?
We'll be using bond dollars. Yes, ma'am.
Which category of the bond dollars?
Economic development or housing?
Housing.
Housing.
Okay. All right, Mr. Larson, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is what cities should do. This is big game hunting here. $30 million. We're putting some skin in the game. It's not going to be money that even if we don't get the grant, we get nothing out of it. We get a good study. We understand ourselves better, and we're able to use that, and as you said, in a variety of ways. I'm thrilled that we're going after big money in this city. $30 million is worth a shot, and this seems like a relatively small investment to make that happen. I think I just calculated it's something like 0.007% to difference in what we're talking about. So I think even any gambling man would say this is worth a shot to take at. So I think we got a good chance at it. We got a good staff working on it, and we're a good city and we're worthy to it. So I think we go for it.
Just a few questions from the chair. It's a good shot to the staff. Where do we get the $3 million from if we get it?
$3 million?
Yes.
That's CDBG.
Okay.
And that's the same commitment we've made in previous years.
Yes, I know we have. Yeah. I would just make this comment, and we don't know if we'll get it or not, but there's only so much money in the pot. And if we develop this kind of money here, that I just want an agreement amongst the council members that there may not be $3 million for every other area in town that needs a shot in the arm. So there's only so much money in the pot, and not everyone's got skin in this game directly. So let that be up front.
Yes, sir, and we're managing the budget very closely.
Okay, but I mean, there's 8 wards, and there's not $24 million in the bucket.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Burke?
Yeah, I want to say this to you. There's been a lot of us not getting what you talk about, skin in the bucket. Enough money in the bucket. But things have happened in this city. We found for other areas to be attractive, productive, and we have been shortchanged. Just as the councilwoman spoke earlier about the Akron Drive. The reason we in East Winston, we don't get some of the benefits because we are locked out. Until you open up so we will be north, south, east, west, that when people in East Winston, it's not so complicated to get to the west side. So you go back and check and see many projects that we have put money in. And we've been open-minded about it because we knew that it would produce. Now, these are people living in, as I tell the city manager, 2 Winston-Salem. These are suffering people. And I feel that we ought to have within our conscience to do the right thing for broken people. This is your home. You grew up here. You saw this from the beginning. You saw everything. In fact, you used to work on the housing committee with me. I'm trying to get scholarships for students so that they could move from that level to another level. But it is a sad situation, Mr. Clark, over there, if you go as regularly.
Oh, I don't doubt it is. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Newman, I don't think you said this, but I want to make this point clear. I think we all agree that community engagement matters because HUD requires it. But I just want to say that community engagement matters because we really need to be out engaging with that community. There is a real inherent fear on the national level, even on the state level. We've seen it in Raleigh and Durham, even in Greensboro, and some of the other major cities in North Carolina, that people are being gentrified and put out of their homes under the auspices of economic and community development and fancy government programs like these. So if we're going to invest $30 million into a community, good, especially communities that need them like this one, but we need to make sure that the residents understand that they are not being put out of their homes so that other people are able to move in. This is more of a renovation and a sprucing up of where they already live. So the community engagement matters for HUD, but we need to express that point to the residents who live in the community as well.
Oh, absolutely. And to that point, that's one of the reasons why we've really been trying to build up our internal capacity as a department with our neighborhood services staff, because that's their whole focus is community engagement, making sure that people are at the table, people decide and determine their own destiny, and then we're there as a support system to them to provide the tools and resources they need to make sure that their neighborhoods are the way they want them to be.
Respect. Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
And you probably remember some things, Mr. Clark, when we went over there with Habitat and with the city making investments in the homes over there. We have not really done what we say to try to make that a complete neighborhood. if you get on Cleveland Avenue and you come from 14th Street to make a right or left on Cleveland, you see Cleveland Public Housing. Well, to the right, we have nice homes that your tax dollars have invested. And somebody's going to give me a report to see how many of these residents are still living there. Then Habitat went up, and they developed so many houses. Then the church, Bethlehem Baptist Church, is a big church over there. Christ Rescue is a big church. They developed 10 apartment units. They put assisted living. But we have not done for them what they felt would be more like a neighborhood, because we've had in the way not creating an atmosphere where people can hold on to, I live here, I'm proud. And I'm pleased that Mr. Taylor would say what he said so he can have a clear understanding. When we did Hope 6, they had the same idea. But they could come back if they wanted to. You were on the board then, housing board. But they didn't want to come back. They got settled where they were living, and new people came in. So this is a reality. We're not going to want to move anybody out. We want to make conditions better and to be committed to our word when we put those houses over there and told the folks you'll have a nice neighborhood, a grocery store, but we have not done that. So I just appeal to your conscience. Let us do what we ought to do. Right.
Can I get a motion on this? We have a motion and a second. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Everybody will wait a second. Everybody please vote.
It comes up and it won't.
Well, it came up and gone. You voted. See, it's up 4-0. There we go. All right.
It read your mind.
It read your mind.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now go to G2. If the secretary please read that one.
Item G2, update on the city's acquisition of 202 South Liberty Strowway, former site of United States Bankruptcy Court, located in the South Ward.
Ben, you going to present this?
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, members of the City Council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Back in April, the Mayor and Council approved a $33 million financing package to address some emerging capital needs that were identified since the November 2018 bond referendum. Included with that package was $1.75 million to acquire and at the time demolish the former U.S. Bankruptcy Court building. At the time, there was interest in developing that property into open space, in particular to honor Peter Oliver, who was a former slave and a member of the Moravian community back in the 18th century, who owned a farm on the site of the U.S. Bankruptcy Court property. And as a result, there were negotiations, or have been negotiations, between the Conservation Fund and Mertz Family Investments, who are the current owners, to acquire the property. Since the approval of the funding, there have been ongoing discussions among a number of interested groups about potential uses of the property beyond just developing it into open space, in particular, repurposing the first floor into a museum. So just want to give you a quick profile of the property. It's a little over 1.5 acres in size. You can see in the picture there and outlined in red, those are the tracts of land that we're looking at. As far as the building goes, almost 19,000 square feet of space. It was built in 1992, so it's 27 years old. And currently there's one tenant occupying the second floor of the building in the state of North Carolina. The U.S. Bankruptcy Court moved out of their space back in July. So just to give you a recap on kind of where the due diligence process has been, both with the Conservation Fund and with the city as we have continued to look at this property. The Conservation Fund did have environmental assessments conducted on the property. There was one area of concern that was identified and is labeled Foundry A on that previous diagram. The owners of the property have committed to cleaning the site after the purchase is approved by the Mayor and Council. Staff made it very clear to the Conservation Fund staff that we want a clean site and not a site where we inherited an environmental issue. We also have been told that the remediation if the council does approve the acquisition of the property, that the remediation could take place in about a week, so it would be a short period of time. The negotiated price between the Conservation Fund and the owners is $1.55 million. That's compared to an appraised value of almost $1.9 million and tax value of a little over $1.65 million. So for the city to take the property from the Conservation Fund, we're looking at a cost of $1.635 million, which would be both the purchase price that the Conservation Fund paid, but also then their costs. On our side, in terms of the due diligence that we've conducted, back in July, our property and facilities management staff did a facility assessment, and overall they found the exterior and the interior of the property to be in good condition, the electrical work as well. They did have one finding, and that is the roof. They do feel like that the roof needs to be replaced at some point, probably in the not-too-distant future. It's original to the building, and they estimate the cost to do that to be about $200,000. But overall, they did find the condition of the property to be in good shape. Also, we've looked at the stormwater infrastructure. We know that there have been some issues with previous tenants there about the drainage piping that we have coming down the west slope there beside the building. So we took a good look at all the stormwater infrastructure in that area because we know that there's new infrastructure in place. We even cambered part of the infrastructure. We know that the property sits in a bowl. So we know that water drains down into it. We know the issue with the drainage piping off the west slope and that it empties directly onto the parking lot. We know that the gutters off the building, off the roof of the building, drain directly into the drainage system. And while that is a 72-inch system, with a major rain event, we're not completely uncertain what would happen if the water were to start to back up towards the building. We also know that there's a private drainage system south of the property, and because it's private, we haven't had an opportunity to evaluate it. We would have to get permission to do an evaluation of that system. So not knowing the condition of that system, again, is an unknown as far as what a major rain event may do in terms of the property itself. So there are some unknowns there that we've looked at, we've identified, and so this is now something we're aware of. And then also we know that the new access road will be built there. The previous road that ran beside the business office place is gone, and that there will be an access road in there. And we have been in discussions with NCDOT staff to get a feel for, would buses be able to get into the site if it were to be repurposed into a museum, and we feel like that would be manageable. So we want to talk a little bit about the lease with the state of North Carolina, the second floor space. Right now they lease almost 2,500 square feet. They have a one-year lease with the current owners with 2 one-year renewals. Right now they're in the first renewal period of that lease, so that runs from March 1st of 2019 through February 28th of 2020. They make an annual lease payment of almost $25,000. Under the terms of the lease, the owners are currently responsible for all the utilities, except the telephone, the exterior maintenance, making sure there's adequate parking, and building maintenance, including HVAC and lighting. So we've already started to have some discussions about just the framework for what a ongoing lease would be between the city and the state, because we're thinking at this point that we would assume the current lease. And we've had discussions about ensuring that there would continue to be reserved spaces for the staff there, that those would be secure spaces, and that there would be secure access to the second floor, knowing that there could be even more public use of the first floor if it's repurposed into a museum. Then we have started to have conversations with New Winston Museum about a potential lease of the first floor, about repurposing that into a museum. And the concept that we've explored with them is entering into a triple net lease for that space, where the New Winston Museum would be responsible for the upfit of the space as well as the operations and maintenance of the space. And when I say maintenance, I mean the ongoing daily maintenance of the space. The city would continue to be responsible for major maintenance of the property, like the mechanical systems and other major building components such as the parking lot. And we've explored the idea of a 10-year lease, so it being kind of a long-term lease, it would require us to go through an upset bid process. So that's really just kind of a framework of what we're looking at with the former U.S. Bankruptcy Court property. I want to recognize Dr. Michael Wakeford, who's the executive director of the new Winston Museum. He's going to give you a brief overview of the vision that they have for that space.
Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, good afternoon. My name is Mike Wakeford. I am Executive Director of New Winston Museum, and I'm joined here today by several board members, staff, capital campaign chair, and campaign council. Thanks for giving us the time to speak a little bit today about our vision for turning the court building into a history center that will tell the stories of Winston-Salem as a whole, and our excitement about contributing to the community effort to activate the strollway site around the indispensable legacy of Peter Oliver. Since opening in 2012, New Winston Museum has pursued its mission through public programs and performances, exhibitions, oral history collection, collaborating with organizations from the School of the Arts to Salem College to Winston-Salem State, the Winston-Salem African American Archive, Renolda House, Triad Cultural Arts Preservation Forsyth, and the list goes on. When New Winston opened, it fulfilled a decades-long dream for our city to have its own history museum, akin to institutions that neighboring cities like Charlotte, High Point, Greensboro, Mount Airy, and Boone already had. A museum with a purview limited not to one historical district or a singular influential family, but the full breadth and complexity of Winston-Salem's evolution into the place it is today. Today, we're ready to grow. New Winston is ready to grow, to reach bigger school-age audiences, to offer more dynamic and varied exhibition content, to deliver a suite of historic walking and trolley tours, to provide internships that introduce young people and emerging professionals to the museum and public history fields, and to play host to events and civic conversations that use encounters with the past to forge better paths forward for our community. Well, let's see. There we go. On this slide, you see a representation of the museum's work, of exhibits and programs that have explored topics ranging from the home front experience during the Civil War, factory life at Reynolds Tobacco, early African-American schooling, and the journeys of formerly incarcerated individuals into lives beyond prison walls. Also highlighted here is a sampling of programs focused on African-American history. This is important because it not only communicates our commitment to placing African-American experiences and legacies at the shared center of the city's historical self-understanding, but it also explains, in part, our attraction to being located on the site now understood to be where a formerly enslaved man, Peter Oliver, worked and lived after securing his freedom in the year 1800. The potential of joining the city and creative corridors and Peter Oliver's descendants and other stakeholders who have shown the foresight to protect the Oliver site and to transform it into a commemorative landscape appears to us a golden opportunity that shouldn't be missed. Let me scroll down. New Winston is poised and ready if given this opportunity. With our design firm, Riggs Ward Design, we've developed a plan for a facility capable of supporting our mission, as well as planning a core exhibit that will engage and educate diverse audiences from K through 12 students to visiting tourists. Our core exhibit will feature signature episodes, themes, and individuals meant to help visitors appreciate the evolution and diversity of the city and to help them understand contemporary challenges and opportunities that face us in an informed and contextualized way. The images here are preliminary and speculative. The exterior shot, the Photoshop of the building in Technicolor is utterly speculative and only meant to spark folks' imagination about how a fairly mundane building could be transformed into something far more dynamic. What we do know about our plan for this place is that it has to be a place where everybody feels welcome and that offers enough variety inside that everybody will understand that there's something for them inside our walls. The plan we have in place is to have several thousand square feet of flexible gallery space to house our core exhibit, rotating galleries, space dedicated to community curation and traveling exhibits that we could bring from the Smithsonian and other providers. We'll have an oral history recording lounge, space for our longtime partner, the Winston-Salem African American Archive, to house and build its collection, and shareable classroom, meeting, and event space where we can host our own programs and share with other organizations. We want this to be a community hub. Now, briefly, I want to let you know that in tandem with announcing a new home, New Winston Museum will soon rebrand as Muse Winston-Salem. This name clarifies that we are a museum for the whole post-merger city. The playful abbreviation from museum to muse suggests that we are both a museum and, in some sense, an anti-museum, devoted to exhibition and education and digital collections, yes, but more interested in sparking conversation, discovery, and engaged experience than in housing dusty artifacts. Muse is also an acronym that captures our mission and vision. Indeed, we have been and will be a museum of understanding, storytelling, and engagement, M-U-S-E. Our new logo invokes an open storybook filled with pages expressing our core belief that this city's story is still being written and that everyone in our story has a story to tell. Council members, thank you again for allowing me to make a few comments. I'll just end with several final points. First, we want to emphasize that if we're fortunate enough to gain support to make the former courthouse our new home, we'll arrive there ready to partner and collaborate with the stakeholders already involved at the Oliver site. We're ready to serve the Oliver legacy in whatever way we can. Second, we'd highlight the incredible opportunity for placemaking that this represents to bring three major pieces together: the Walter Hood pedestrian bridge, the Peter Oliver landscape, and a museum. I think that trio has great potential to be integrated together into a remarkable urban space. Further, we want to point out that if the museum were located there, with the arrival of the new Callidium just down the road on Merschel Plaza, right along the strollway would come New Winston Museum, and an equal distance further south would be Old Salem, and we would have helped establish a real museum corridor right down the strollway and help fulfill the Creative Corridor's vision of turning the strollway into a more active, connecting space. We think we're an organization particularly suited to develop the court building into a museum responsible to the Oliver site. Our track record of exhibits and programs, along with a diverse and motivated governing board, ensures that Muse will be a history and culture center for the whole community. And we're well positioned to make this all happen successfully and expediently. Our business plan, our endowment grants us a certain level of financial stability. Our business plan is ambitious, but grounded in an insistence on fiscal discipline and long-term sustainability. And if we can move this plan forward with the city in a timely fashion, it will catalyze the $2.4 million capital campaign that will launch its crucial public phase just 5 months from now, or even less than that, in January 2020. Thank you, and I'll be happy to entertain questions.
I'm waiting for Ben to finish this.
So just to conclude, this is an information item at this point. As far as next steps we go, if council has additional information they need staff to provide, we're prepared to then bring back an action item potentially next month to approve acquisition of the property and assumption of the lease with the state of North Carolina. And then at that point, we'll begin negotiations with New Winston Museum in earnest. We would have to go through the upset bid process and come back at a later time for approval of a lease with New Winston Museum. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I was just going to make a comment. Your information to us was just excellent. As you spoke, I could just see what you were talking about and the difference it could make for this city as a diverse city. And I want you to know that.
Thank you.
But I want to ask a question. The lady sitting back there, Miss Scales. Are you Miss Scales Dark? Yes. Not long ago, we had downtown at the Benton, the Star. And there was a man in that book, Mr. William Scales, I believe. Huh? Okay, well, see, I couldn't get to that important engagement, but I always thought when I came here, between Patterson, 3rd and 4th and Church and Chestnut, where all the blacks gathered, they talked about a Mr. Scales owning the theater. And so I said, that's Mr. Robert Scales. But now who is Mr. William Scales?
William Samuel Scales was Robert Scales' father, my grandfather. So he was the one who started the entrepreneurial enterprise, which were passed down to Robert.
Yes. And I thought about Miss Scipio when she worked hard for us to have the Afro-American, what we're going to have. There are a lot of good people who can tell the history, and I think we ought to tell our own and not make sure other folks can tell it better than us. And I think that is just wonderful what you're initiating and what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
I think this is great. It's a good idea. But my concern is, again, that I've lived in this city for 65 years, and I've seen other African Americans come forward with initiatives to sustain our history in this city. And I've never seen the support that this particular item gets. I received some phone calls and emails from African Americans over the past week about this item. I don't have an issue that the Oliver family was pulled out and we found all this great stuff, their history, but there are lots of African Americans all over Winston-Salem that are buried beneath this soil that built this town that deserve to be called out as well. I also believe that, I don't know our plans yet for Union Station, but I believe if we do a museum that wants to accentuate the African American history in my town, that it needs to be where my folk are, right at a significant interstate and crossway of 5274 and Interstate 40. My concern, Councilmember Clark, is again the lease with the state. That's not in stone. We know how this goes. And their budget, their financial plan on how they're going to raise money and help pay for this building, and the issues with the environmental issues with the building, whether it's the roof or the parking lot or the water. And, you know, again, I think, and I know you got some good people that's worked on this. I just, you know, again, you might want to do a little bit more community engagement like we've been talking about, of the people that are here in the city that are African American that live in the communities. And, you know, maybe we don't have the money that the Pauls have, but you need to, they live in Louisville. They folk might have lived in it, but they live in Louisville. And Mayor Pro Tem, again, I think they've done an excellent job, but I'm speaking for the people that I know and represent that are born and raised in this city. And again, I commend everybody that's done this, but I have a concern about the money issue and how we're going to pay for this, and we got to take care of all of the stuff for this building. And how, yeah, you got it.
Mr. McIntosh?
I think most people are aware that I was not a big fan of buying this property in the first place without a plan to use it. We had talked about buying it and tearing it down. This, to me, though, does seem like a really spectacular use of that space. I share concerns about ongoing maintenance costs. I do not want this to be a continuing bottomless pit of money for the city of Winston-Salem, so that's a big concern of mine. But shown some actual financials a little further down the road, I would be a big supporter of this. I've traveled to a lot of large and small cities around the state of North Carolina, and I'm really amazed that we don't have a history museum of any size here already. Small towns, Albemarle has a wonderful history museum, and we need that, and it needs to be all-inclusive. It needs to be the history of the entire city. It sounds like that's what this effort is. So I will be a supporter, given some of those financial concerns addressed.
Thank you. Kirk, you're back there. I did have a question. Can you come up on the building? I'm assuming you did the work on the building. The roof's 27 years old, I gather, since the building's 27 years old, and at some point will need to be replaced in the near future. How about the HVAC, the chillers, and all that type of stuff?
Refer to Ben, I believe he's.
Okay, okay.
We can provide you, more information. I think that there was one split system that I think our property and facilities management staff said probably we need to look at. But overall, I mean, they said the interior condition of the building was good.
Okay, but I don't want any oops and surprises. We are going to get a bill for $200,000 in the next 4 to 5 years if the roof really is 27 years old, and if it's the original AC units, we're going to get some bills there too. So I just want to get a complete understanding of what it is. I will say when, and Ms. Burke, I'll get you in just a second. When it was first proposed to spend $1.7 million to buy and tear down the building, I thought that was absolutely preposterous. But I like what I hear. I like the idea of a city museum. Now I got to figure out if I like putting it in that building. So I need some more information on the building. I would like a little more information. The numbers you gave, and Ms. Adams brought this up. The state's really got a half a year left, and then one more year extension. So that's a year and a half, and they may or may not renew after that. So I would like to get a feel from them if they would be willing to sign more than a 1-year lease. And I believe it's the Highway Patrol that's headquartered there or something like that.
That is correct, Councilmember Clark, and I will share with you that they are interested in that. They would like to remain in that location.
Okay, good.
Chair, question there, just to that point.
Yeah.
It would also be nice to have an idea of what that space would lease for on the open market should they leave. What's that space worth?
Okay.
To a new tenant.
The last one, I was not a supportive of Union Station because I thought it was a project without a plan. And unfortunately, that has been the case. We have now spent close to $18 million on Union Station, and we still don't know what to do with it. We need to get the plan in front of the building here. So I would like, you mentioned in there we're going to negotiate at least with the new Winston Museum. Well, I think we need to put some meat on those bones. I'd like to know what that is, what the state's willing to commit to, and then to get back to what Mr. McIntosh just said. I'd want the city staff to give us a budget for the next 10 years that if we were to buy this, what it's going to cost us. And that's the cost of the building, all in, minus whatever the revenue we get. And I think I had one. I also would like, and Ms. Adams brought this up, in certain respects, this is a good location because it is, and you mentioned it is kind of on Museum Row or Museum Walkway. But if it does have an emphasis on the African American community, it's a long ways from the African American community. And it's kind of down in a hole and out of the way. So I want to be sure that there's a buy-in from the entire community that this is where we want to put it. So to me, getting all the numbers lined up is very important. And the last one is I'm not sure why we're using the North Carolina Conservatory or whoever these folks are. If they're going to buy it, mark it up $85,000 if I did my math correctly and sell it to me. Why don't we just buy the building for $155,000? So I'm not sure what benefit they're bringing to it. And I would be supportive once I see the numbers, comprehensive. And I would also like some information on your fundraising. I don't know if you've done a feasibility study yet or whatever that is said. That be sure we have a plan for the building and we can implement it, and then we can look at buying the building and moving forward with it. But as I said, conceptually, I like the idea. We just, I think, need to get down in the weeds now and get all the numbers together.
Sir.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, go ahead.
So I feel like I've responded to some of the really important questions that are being raised. I don't want to leave the perception that what New Winston has been or is trying to be is an African American history museum. The reason I put emphasis on our track record of doing exhibits and programs on focused on African American history, because as we've come into this, I guess I'd say two things. As we've come into this conversation at the Oliver site, where other stakeholders have been thinking and working on it for a long time. We're trying to be very sensitive and responsive to the fact that there is already a great gravity of center of interest in making sure that that site, in fact, sings the song of Peter Oliver and this remarkable story that he represents. And so one of the reasons I put some emphasis on our track record of giving equal time, so to speak, to African American history is to make the simple point that we think what we do will resonate nicely on that site and will be value added to whatever creative corridors and the other stakeholders involved at the Oliver site do, and we're just eager to be invited into that conversation and then join it. The other thing I just make is a simple point. It's a truism. The story of Winston-Salem cannot properly be told without it being the story of African Americans as well. So none of us who are involved in New Winston Museum would imagine creating a museum that doesn't give greater attention to African American stories than any institution on this side of the city, at least, ever has. That's our goal, and it's not. While I absolutely honor the serious questions that are being raised, and as most of you know, we've been part of a conversation, angling for a new home for some time, including places east of Highway 52. The organization is certainly not out to tell anybody else's story. We're out to tell this city's story as well as has ever been told. And we know from ground zero that will, it always has for us, but will in the future involve lots of community engagement, a diverse board, and a lot of best practices in the building of community history museums in new southern cities like ours. And so I really honor, that's not to dismiss, it's to honor and affirm the questions that are being raised.
Okay. Well, Ben, I think what I'm hearing is a general, like the idea, now let's go get the details worked out before we write a big check.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That was information only. Thank y'all very much.
Remember, I had to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Burke. Go ahead.
Some things that Ms. Adams brought to our attention about it just being Oliver, that has been a community concern. I also mentioned I felt Mr. Oliver had done an outstanding job, but there were some other folks who's also, and how would this museum put them into the picture? That would be most important. And then all of our history has been torn down. How are we going to get that into the history? And so it's so important, because if we're going to do this, it really doesn't matter to me about the location, because when we bring tours in, we put places to visit. Visit Winston, they always list, and of course you will be making sure in your marketing that people coming from around the country, like when we had the Black Festival, a lot of them would love to have had that to see, and they were all downtown. Mm-hmm. But I want us to, one thing that I looked at, and I guess Mr. McIntosh is commercial, but when you have something commercial, a lot of them pay their own utilities and their own heating and cooling, and for us to be paying all of that, I always felt that the city, to me, could be more business-like and getting more tax dollars back in a different way than what we do.
And the conversation here is about doing what's called a triple net lease, where the tenant pays all those costs. The landlord doesn't pay them, the tenant pays them. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Good point. Mr. Larson?
Yes, I've been very quiet. This is in the South Ward, and obviously I'm very excited about it, but let me answer one question maybe that you raised, and that is, why are we paying anything to the Conservation Fund? And I think any of us that have worked with the Conservation Fund knows that they are able to do a lot of things more quickly than what our own real estate office is able to do. So all of the deed survey work, all of the environmental assessments, all of the negotiations across the Atlantic Ocean with the owners of this property have been undertaken by the Conservation Fund. They have been acting as an agent, basically on their own. We've paid them nothing to initially make this deal possible. And they negotiated the price, which I think is a good price when you compare it to the tax values and the appraised price, the appraisals that have come in on the property. So that's the service that they've provided, and so far they've received no compensation for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there are 2 items left. One is a small piece of land next to Long Creek Park, and the other one is an update on the, I'm calling that the East End Development Project. Are either one of these time sensitive? In that case, I would prefer to go to G4. Miss Adams is amenable to laying the small piece of land. Can we go to G4, then we'll come back to G3 at the next meeting? That's okay with everybody. Okay, G4, Secretary, please read that.
Item G4, information on the previously approved job creation and economic development agreement between the City of Winston-Salem and SG Athens Community Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem again, members of the committee.
Good afternoon.
Evan Raleigh, Assistant City Manager. This item is a continuation of a conversation that was begun during the May committees. I know we're short on time. For the sake of brevity, I will just give you a very quick summary of the item that you have before you. Again, this was brought initially as a request from Councilmember Scipio to have this body consider rescinding authorization for 2 separate agreements between the city and SG Atkins Development Corporation. The first was an agreement that allocated $3 million of 2014 Economic Development Bond funds to Atkins for the purposes of acquiring properties within the East End footprint, hopefully to spur development in the East End. The second agreement was for essentially a reauthorization of a 3-year, $60,000 a year agreement with Atkins that would be going to support project management, support a real estate development position in the organization for the purposes essentially of implementing the East End, components of the East End Master Plan. So what you have in your packet, there were several questions that were raised at committees in May. You'll see the response memo that outlines responses to several of those questions that were raised. And at this particular time, staff is simply seeking direction in terms of where this committee would like to take this item. If it's deemed appropriate, we could certainly bring forward a resolution that spells out, I think, what might have been the position at the time or thought from Councilmember Scipio, which would essentially be rescinding these 2 agreements. But we are, at this particular time, waiting for further direction from this body. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
So I did see you have the memo in here that answers those questions. Thank you. Ms. Scipio, I'm going to give you the floor a minute. Why don't you tell us where your thinking is and what your thoughts are and whatever else you want to say.
All right. When this first came to committee, to council, I want to reiterate the same things I said before. First of all, there's a lot of interest going on in the East Ward, particularly in the East End development. There are lots of projects going on that will be coming forth in the next year, and they're significant. This particular event was to be used, $3 million to be used for land banking. Mm-hmm. Land banking is something we can do. It was to land bank specifically for economic development. My first concern was that when I looked at the entire agreement, it was for $3 million, but only $750 was going to go to specific land banking costs, because there were other things that were in there that we would be paying for as a city, which was all of the maintenance and the taxes on any property that was purchased. And I felt that we should not be doing that, that if we're going to give money to someone to buy property, they should be willing to take care of the maintenance and the taxes. If not, we could buy the property and we wouldn't have to pay the taxes. As I look further into the agreement, and since there was already so much energy coming in, I didn't know whether land banking at this time is essential. And if you recall at the discussion that came forth from Ms. Davis, she had said that the commercial properties that they wanted to acquire, they had problems acquiring it, which was the shopping center, the Burger King property, the service station. And so since it's for economic development, I asked, what is the property that's left? And how much would it cost? Because they're thinking of buying property that's already commercial. Otherwise, you have to go to residential properties. There was a sense that there were a couple of properties that could be purchased, but I did not get a commitment as to what amount of money would it take to purchase that. I'm concerned whether $3 million is adequate or not. I was concerned that you're tying up $3 million and the agreement would allow that property to be tied up over up to 15 years. It's not empty land. It's all the land, mostly in the East End, is already built on. So I felt that in the East Ward, we have other possibilities and other lands, and I would like that money to be set aside for any economic development project that comes forth. There's all kinds of energy coming to our ward, and to tie up $3 million in an area that that's already getting energy and doesn't seem to need any land banking at this time, I felt that was not something we should approve. I also wanted to know what parcels are going to be developed and what's going to be there. But more importantly, I'm concerned about how we set precedents in our community. There are 5 other CDCs operating in our ward. And how do we choose who gets an opportunity to develop? And what's their proposal? So I think unless we are willing to make this kind of proposal to other CDCs when they come in, we're setting a precedent. The other CDCs in the ward who are doing things and have done things have not asked for us to fill a position, to fund a position. I feel that, again, is a risky task to do. Once you do it for one, you must do it for the other. Otherwise, we're being prejudiced. I grew up where there's all kinds of prejudice that came about, favoritism, and I just can't be part of that. I want us to be equal in this community. So if we're going to land bank, I think that all of these groups that are in the area who want to be part of that should write a proposal. We should put something out there and let everybody be able to say, I want to do that and this is what it's going to cost. And when we give money out for a project, if we're going to fund something at $3 million, when property sells again, my assumption is we're going to get all of our money back. That's not what the proposal calls for. We don't get our money back. We may get $750, but that's not guaranteed. Matter of fact, we won't get it back because they're all development fees and other things that are in the plan. So we don't get our total amount back. And I think that's not what we should have as a business model, that we go and then have to forgive loans to come back because of whatever circumstance. So I just think it is an opportunity for the funds to be used anywhere in the East Ward, not just in East End, and that they should be doled out just like we do with everything else. It's a competitive basis. First come, first serve, look at the project, give to that project what it needs. And you know, we do gap funding. I'm concerned that if we just do this one, that we may be setting a precedent that we can't go forward with. I am in favor of land banking when it makes good sense. There are some other properties in East Winston that aren't fully developed. If we wanted to do land banking, they certainly could be, particularly for housing. But this is purely for economic development. And I just have concerns over that.
Okay, Ms. Burke?
So I have a clear understanding. You're going to keep your $3 million in the East Ward?
Yes.
All right.
I think the East Ward should have it, and any project that comes forth, we can decide that it goes to that project. There are other projects coming, and we need the funds to help fund it.
As long as you're going to keep your $3 million. Okay.
Yes, we'll keep it.
All right.
Designated monies for the East Ward.
All right. That's clear. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I'll make another comment.
Go ahead.
I think it's good that the council person has looked at the board, and we know she works very hard, and she's working with the constituents in the East Ward, and there are other CDCs. So in the past, we have listened to us of what we'd like to have in our ward, and even though when I leave, I may have some things I want, but a new person's going to just say what they want, not what I, and that's as long as it's credible and right and decent.
Mr. Larson,
Listening to this, what I'm hearing is a very nimble and flexible use of a limited amount of money and how to best maximize that money effectively, the city actually holding the money, as it were. We just talked about, what does the conservation fund do, and they had a plan that they worked against. They knew where they were going, they knew what the money was to be spent on, and they acted as the middle agent for us to perform that. And what I'm hearing, Councilmember Supio, if I'm correct, is that until a plan is submitted and the cost projected out, that any overhead cost or anything that the city might incur would not happen. That it would be taken on as a one-by-one basis and would be cost-effectively evaluated at that time. And it provides maximum flexibility for you to work within the ward in an area that is needed. We are trying to focus on those neighborhoods, that it provides that flexibility for us to meet the need in a most cost-effective way. That is what I'm sort of hearing. Equitably within the different CDCs. So it sounds reasonable to me.
Any other comments? And I know I owe you some time here, so we're going to finish this real quick. Mr. Bennett?
One quick question. I remember to a degree in both 2014 and 2018, we got pretty specific about particular projects that we anticipated funding in certain categories would go for. I apologize, but I do not recall the specifics of what was it, $10 million in 2014?
Councilmember Bessie,
for that economic development portion, was that a $10 million?
You're talking about from the 2014?
2014, yes.
We can get that information.
Okay. I do not recall whether the East End project was specifically referenced as a selling point to the community when that was discussed.
It was not. Councilmember Bessie, I can answer that question quickly for you. It was not specifically spelled out at that particular time. What we had in 2014 was a pot of about $20 million generally dedicated to economic development projects. As projects have come along, we have taken those monies out and dedicated them to specific projects along the way, East End being one now.
The reason I ask, because it would be a different issue to me if there were a commitment to the voting public that there would be a certain amount of funding put aside for a certain area because of some argument that was put forward that it was a key to economic development of a greater area. And if that was not the case here, then that opens it.
This is for information only, and I appreciate your updates. I drive through there every day because I get off 40 right there at 5th Street, and I go right by the Burger King with the zoning sign that's been up, 3 years now? Yeah. Go past your building. Yeah. Go past, they just tore some old apartments down. I'm going to be a good politician and kick this one back to the staff and the council member of the ward to come back with a specific motion or whatever it may be.
We'll do that.
I certainly believe that bang for our buck, and I would like for us to spend the $3 million as best we can to get the most benefit for the citizens. And I will defer to the experts in that area to come back with a recommendation. Is that?
I would like to see what impact staff thinks this has on the East End master plan, on the East End development plan, because there was a significant amount of money and time spent with the community to come up with a plan, and if this shoots a big hole in it, that'll impact the way I react.
Mr. Clark.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
maybe I need to deepen my voice a little bit. Yes, ma'am. Come on,
I'm
sir.
sorry. I was looking. Yeah.
I do share Councilman McIntosh's concern. If we did go to people and say there was a master plan that was being created and that the city would put dollars into this plan to spark economic development, you used the word precedent. Well, what kind of precedent would we set in reverse if we went back and rescinded that agreement and that partnership that we sort of semi-created with the community? And there might be the semblance of dissatisfaction with the Simon G. Atkins CDC. No one said it, but I just want to make a point. The Enterprise Center started off sort of in the Southeast Ward and then moved across the street to the East Ward. They have done an excellent job of redeveloping that southeastern portion of the community, creating dozens, if not hundreds, of entrepreneurial opportunities. And they've done a good job with sparking some good community and economic development and some programs in the Southeast Ward. I do not want the Simon G. Atkins CDC to, number one, feel that we are not appreciative of their contribution to our community. And number two, I'm concerned about the precedent that we set when we create an East End master plan or a Southeast master plan and say, here's the economic development dollars we're going to put in. Even though we haven't quite seen the development, we know that it's on the way. And how much time will lapse if we rescind this agreement and go somewhere else with the money? What happens with all of those other sons, all of those apartment complexes that have invested the time and resources thinking development was coming that way, and that the city and the economic development arm for it, HBCU. And that's another point. I mean, there's a lot of talk about gentrification. Well, those apartments are owned by United Metropolitan.
Mm-hmm.
The Simon G. Atkins CDC is an economic development wing, I believe, of Winston-Salem State University. And it means something to me, and it means something to other people in the community, where those who have an African-American presence are there in the communities helping to spark and maintain economic development as opposed to the concept of gentrification.
Okay. Ms. Scipio?
The plan does not get affected if you can't, the plan itself stays. There are projects that are coming. They're coming with funding, with something. This plan had no projects with it. It's just buying land with nothing already decide or determine what's going to be there and how it's going to be there. And so the plan is still there. My concern is that other entities are sparking the development. They're doing plans. They're saying, here's, like you said, United Metropolitan.
Right.
They're in agreement. They have a partnership with GOLA CDC. They're taking part of that plan and planning it. They have site plans, designs. They're doing that, and then they're finding the funds to help capitalize it. They haven't come to us. I don't know if they will. But they are doing that independently. We just sold land in the East End, or I guess it's almost going to be finalized, for the Old Smith dry cleaning. Mm-hmm. So people are picking up that plan and bringing it to pass. I am really, really certain that that plan will come to pass. I am very much an advocate for Simon Green Atkins CDC. Don't get me wrong on why. I looked at that and said, I'm not in agreement. I'm not in agreement because we don't get our fair share back, number one. Number two, I don't know if there is a plan that they can pull off and want to pull off in developing it. And if I want to wait 15 years with $3 million tied up And I've got other developers coming in to do things, and we don't have anything for them. So if there's a project, you know, let's do it. But I just didn't see it being fair to the city to give out money, and we have to pay the expenses on whatever's bought for up to 15 years. I just thought that wasn't fair to us. And the plan doesn't give us everything. It's no guarantee we're going to get it back. And that's not a good use of tax dollars to me.
Okay. Well, let
but
me do
anyway.
this. Again, I'm passing
Yeah.
the buck back to the staff. Let's make
That's
sure we
good.
talk to all the stakeholders,
That's good.
council members, Winston-Salem State, Atkins, and all the
Yeah.
folks, and see if we can come back with a resolution, because I am certainly not an expert, and I really look to guidance from the folks that represent more of that area to come back with something. Okay, Mr. Taylor, maybe 6:20, that's about 4 minutes. 6:20, they will convene the public safety. We're adjourned.